The Solitaire Series, Episode 10, The Four of Hearts, by Troy Lambert. Narrated by Troy Lambert. Stephan opened the driver's door of his car and stood. He stretched for the sky first, brought his arms down to his side in a huge arc, and then reached down to touch his toes. Once he'd done that, he straightened. The drive from Vegas to Phoenix wasn't horrible, but then again, it wasn't his favorite either. It took a little over 4.5 hours if he obeyed the speed limits. Stephan never did, not since he replaced his old beater with this new ride. It was a Lexus, so an upscale Toyota, but still much better than what he'd had before. He looked at the home, located off a street called Indian School on near 59th Avenue. He wondered why they hadn't yet changed the street's name in these politically sensitive times. Gravel replaced grass in the front yard, and tall cactus substituted for trees. Some of them must be quite old, and that made sense. He bet someone started this neighborhood in the 1970s, and many homeowners, while repainting, preserved that style. The house was made of standard tan stucco. However, its bright red front gate, featuring a large brass heart-shaped knocker, set it apart from the others on the block. Well, that was the only thing at first glance. At a second, more attentive glance, the cameras became visible. There were no less than 2 covering the front gate, and Stephan counted at least 6 on the property, high resolution, wide angle at a guess. Those were just visible above the fence surrounding the backyard, but at a little under 6 feet tall, he didn't have the view a taller person might. It didn't matter. They always knew he was coming. The bruises from his last encounter had healed nicely. The money he'd earned went to the new ride sitting by the curb now, one that seemed oddly out of place in this neighborhood. He walked to the gate and tried the handle, finding it unlocked. Stephan drew a pistol from a holster in the small of his back. He had a fake U.S. Marshal's badge that, while it would not pass deep scrutiny, usually put off anyone curious enough to ask for it. Arizona was an open carry state anyway, and he'd had a permit to carry concealed in all but a few states ever since he'd taken the Utah course. That was something he'd done on his own, even before he took this job, and it certainly came in handy now. He towed the gate open and stepped inside. The door knocker clinked lightly as it swung. A screen door protected the regular door behind it, and everything looked ordinary at first glance. All the shades were drawn, some windows covered in blinds, the others covered by curtains. From what he knew of his target, this was also to be expected. People described him as a night owl, a redundant term Stephan hated. Owls were already nocturnal. Day owls were nearly non-existent, as far as he knew. He moved forward and studied the screen door. There was an alarm strip on the top, one easy enough to disable, but if that was the obvious one, there was probably another hidden one. "You might as well come in," a deep voice said, startling him. To the right of the door was a small, normal-looking doorbell. Stephan looked up, but couldn't see the speaker, wherever it was. "You won't find it. Open the door slowly. Put the piece away, too. You won't need it. Well, probably won't." "Why should I trust you?" The voice was coming from above him somewhere, but he concentrated on the door instead. It could be booby-trapped, but he saw no evidence of that. "We're just going to talk, but you won't get inside unless I let you in." Stephan looked around some more. The backyard was empty. A stump remained where some kind of thin tree had once been, probably a palo verde, another name he found amusing. The name meant green stick. At the rear of the yard, there was another gate, one that led to a carport in the alley. Through the slats in the wood, he thought he could see an older Monte Carlo, dark blue or black, parked there. He could just try to keep an eye on the place and wait this guy out, but he doubted that would work, and besides, he didn't want to spend too much time here. The climate was similar to Vegas in some ways, but this city lacked many of the perks Vegas had, at least the ones that mattered to him. Instead, he looked back to the door and put the piece back in its holster. "I'm coming in. If you promise just to talk for now, I'll promise the same." Stephan opened the screen door and flinched as he heard it click, but it was just the lock. It was an electronic one of some sort, and the homeowner, his target, could be controlling it from nearly anywhere inside. Or outside, he reminded himself. It wouldn't do to neglect checking his 6 to see what was behind him on a regular basis. No one had guaranteed him that his target was the only occupant of the home. "Think, Stephan," he told himself. "Fucking stay alert." "Well?" the voice said, clearly impatient. Stephan opened the inner door and stepped into something entirely unexpected. Inside, the home was completely open. A few pillars held up the roof in key places, and there were still beams in place, but he could see almost the entire place without moving. None of the pillars were really large enough for a normal-sized person to hide behind. It looked like someone had taken a loft apartment and parked it inside this house. All the walls were covered in art. Some was more modern than others, and one wall was entirely covered in black and white photography. He recognized a couple of shots, but most were unfamiliar to him. Still, he liked them. They were soothing. The place was well lit, mostly with natural light. 2 skylights were over the living area, and he could see 2 more in the dining area. A leather chair and a cloth sofa were in the front room. They didn't match exactly, but they seemed to work well together in the space. At the far end of the home, a door in the center of the wall was closed. He assumed that led to a bedroom and bathroom, but it didn't matter. His target stood in the kitchen, making coffee in a large glass pour-over device. Stephan sized him up. Taller than he was, the man had broad shoulders but a slightly broader gut. He didn't let that fool him, though, because one glance at his forearms revealed tight muscles under intricate tattoos. He sported a graying beard, and while he appeared to be balding slightly, still had a mostly full head of hair. He wore a loose, plain, black t-shirt. "Coffee?" the man asked. "Sure." "Cream or sugar?" "Black is fine." "Okay, it'll be just a couple of minutes. Have a seat." "Sure." Stephan chose the seat furthest from the door on the couch, really in the corner of the room. He could see everything from there, and no one would move behind him without him noticing. The kitchen was unusual. One wall had more standard cabinets over an industrial stove, but on the others were metal shelves that were pretty open. The man took 2 white mugs from one of them and set them on the counter, filling them. He then approached the living area carrying both. It was the first time Stephan could see his lower half. His target wore khaki shorts and a flip-flop on one leg. The other leg was missing, replaced by a prosthetic, one equipped with a cool-looking spring-like foot. He gestured with his chin, and Stephan pulled 2 coasters out of a holder on the coffee table and spread them out. The man set a mug on each. He took a sip. The taste was smooth, not bitter at all, and almost sweet. "What is this?" "Ethiopian beans, organically sourced. I get them raw and roast them myself." "It's fabulous." "Thanks, but I assume you did not come all this way to compliment my coffee." "Not exactly." "Solitaire sent you." "They did." "What do they want?" "Well, they say you owe 40. I'm here to collect or, at the very least, encourage you to pay in an extremely timely manner." "And?" "They also said you may have something of value to trade, something they want." "Ha! That may be true. What's their offer?" "Offer?" "Look, let's not play games. I sense you've done this before. You look to be in pretty good shape, and you're probably a good fighter. You have that piece in the small of your back, but I'm betting that most of the time you don't need it." "You look to be pretty good shape yourself," Stephan said, but couldn't help but let his eyes linger on his missing leg. "I am. This slows me down a little, but it can be an advantage." "I'm sure," Stephan said, unsure how that worked, but really not wanting to find out. "The offer." "They want the card." "Which one?" That threw Stephan off, but he recovered quickly. "I think you know which one. They told me you have a 4 of hearts. Do you have another one that might interest them too?" "Would I tell you if I did?" "Actually, you just did by asking which one. Maybe I should just have a look around myself." "I wouldn't try that." "Why not?" "The house is special. Were you to go looking for, say, a safe someplace where I might have something hidden, you might end up looking a lot like me, if you live." He patted his artificial leg. "How'd that happen, if you don't mind me asking?" "Iraq, not solitaire. Gambling came later." "Gotcha. So about these cards." "Card 1. That was the offer." "A second one thrown in might offer you some additional protection in the future." "Or it might just offer you a bonus and not do shit for me. How long you been doing this for solitaire?" Stephan didn't answer. "Right. Either not long, or you think I'm really naive. I'm not. You don't have the authority to offer that." I don't, but I do know my boss. Probably not as well as you think. Still, let's say I did trust you and you did get that deal. What if that didn't mean anything to me? Does it? I've been in Gamblers Anonymous for 4 months. Haven't touched a deck of cards since, at least not to gamble. Congratulations. Does that mean you have the money, or do you want to trade the card to pay off your debt? I think I'll keep the card, thanks. I was afraid you'd say that. Stephan stood and pulled the small revolver from the small of his back. It was a .38, but at this close range it would be plenty effective. The one-legged man remained seated. They really want the card, he said. Sorry. I'm sorry, too. Stephan heard a click and he jumped forward, tackling his target and rolling over the leather chair at the same time. The gun flew from his hand and slid across the tile of the dining room floor. A small blast destroyed the end of the couch where he had been standing. The overturned chair shielded both of them. Stephan found himself on top of the large man and arranged himself so he was straddling his chest, pinning the target's arms the best he could using his knees. No more games. Where's the fucking card? Fuck off. No, thanks. I'll pay you double. You keep the difference. I come back without the card and with the money, and that might harm my reputation. I can't have that. I'm not going to give it up. No matter what? Stephan said. He pulled back his fist. No matter what. Stephan found himself airborne and upside down. He struck the wall and fell awkwardly to the floor. A framed painting fell from its hook above and struck him on the head before landing in his lap. He tossed it aside and stood, but his opponent was much quicker than he figured he'd be. The man stood in the kitchen, Stephan's pistol in one hand and a simple remote in the other. You think the couch was the only thing rigged? He asked. I had no way of knowing what seat you'd choose. This triggers the same kind of blast from the chair next to you. Stephan looked down and saw the overturned chair was right next to his left leg. In the bottom of it, he could see small, sharp pieces of steel embedded, probably propelled there by the blast from the couch. You can doubt my word if you want, but I learned a lot when in Iraq before this happened. Who are you? Oh, now you want to know my name? You're good. I admit that. And you have the drop on me. You can make me leave at this point, but if I leave, they'll send someone else. I know that. If you kill me, they'll send someone else too. And they may not be as easy to fool as I was. You're pretty perceptive. I'm good, but not the best. I also know that. So what's your play? Do you think you're going to dispatch me and run? Where will you go that they can't find you? The gun dropped to his side. He set the remote on the counter and walked back around to Stephan. He held out his hand. I'm Jake. Stephan. He shook the other man's hand. Where do we go from here? Jake asked. There are only a few options, Stephan told him. I need to go back with something. You can give me money, but they won't be satisfied, and you know it. I don't think they knew about your rehabilitation. Jake smirked. Okay. I go back with the card, and you'll be free as long as I don't mention the fact that you might have another one. Would you do that? Why would I? I can make it worth your while, Jake said. How much? 20. Deal, Stephan said. So, I give you the card, the 4 of hearts, and 20 grand, and you leave me alone? Yep. Okay. Jake walked down the right side of the large single room towards what appeared to be the bedroom, and stopped in front of a blank area on the wall. He touched something there, and a large section slipped aside, revealing a large safe. He set the remote down on a tiny shelf, still holding the gun in one hand, and worked the combination dial with the other. Stephan stepped forward slowly, but the gun came up quickly, the one-legged man again proving quicker than he looked. Not so fast. He stopped and stared, heard a click, and then heard the safe door open. This was his chance. He lunged forward, going low, and dropped into a baseball slide. The gun came up. Stephan heard it go off, smelled cordite, and felt the bullet whiz by his head and ricochet off the floor. He kicked out as he slid, striking the man's artificial leg, and Jake fell, the gun clattering down the hallway, skittering along the floor, bouncing off the walls and ending up back in the living room near the overturned chair. He heard a thud and reached around to grab his opponent, but he didn't have to. Blood oozed from a cut on the side of Jake's head, pooling on the floor. He watched carefully for a moment, making sure the man wasn't playing possum. It's what he would have done. Then he looked in the safe. Inside were stacks of both opened and unopened packs of cards, all identical decks in red packages. Not one of them was different than the others, or bore any unique marks he could see. There might be a valuable four of hearts in there somewhere, but he had no idea what deck it was in. He had no choice but to secure his prisoner and force him to tell him which was the right one, or he could take them all with him. Neither option held much appeal. Stephan walked down the hall to pick up his gun, keeping one eye on Jake the whole time. He glanced away for a second as he collected the revolver. He saw movement in his peripheral vision and looked back. Jake stood by the safe, face half bloody, holding the remote. "Don't," Stephan said, but Jake smiled, revealing blood on his teeth. Then he pressed the button. That's all for this episode of the Solitaire series. Thanks for listening to the Solitaire series episode 10, The Four of Hearts. Next up in the series, the Eight of Clubs.